digitaltransformation.com. So I'll hand over now to Tony and Joakim to get going. So please enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. My name is Tony Moroney. There we are. So Tony Moroney, I'm from Beta Digital. I'm one of the partners in Beta Digital, which is a specialist digital transformation advisory firm focused on the Irish and UK markets. There are three partners in the firm. There's myself, Paul, who you've met already, and Louise O'Connor, who is on a well-earned staycation this week. Joakim.
Yeah, and I'm Joakim from Stockholm, Sweden then, along with my colleagues. You can see Lars here as well, who joined us. And I think we have the others maybe also online with us today. Dig Journey was founded a few years ago after we actually released our book, Leading Digital Transformation. So the book became a company, and we are very happy to have you here today. We will today also end this session with telling you about a training session and education that we will have. So we will end the session by talking a bit about that as well. All right. As you might know, digital transformation as a concept is quite complex, and it's a word, or rather two words, that mean a bit of different things for different people. So we're going to kick this off by you telling us, or everyone, what digital transformation means to you. So we're going to use Mentimeter here, and Tony, you could just kick that off as well so everyone could join. So what you do, I'm sure that at least some of you have used Menti before. You just go to your web browser and you then write menti.com. You can see that up in the top here, menti.com, and you use the code 5084072, and then you will have a few rows. So you write one or maximum two words to describe this per row, and you will have 1.5 minutes to describe this. So please join us and build this word cloud together. All right, the one word that is in focus here is change. Of course, transformation is a very large change. What else do we have here? A changing system process. You talk about competitiveness, positive change, capabilities, a new normal. We talk about technology, innovation, new technology, streamlining, relevance, efficiency, a modern way of working, adaptiveness, adaptation, which is, of course, the same thing here. So a lot about technology as well, but also some about leadership, some about how the processes is a part of this. Also, of course, we need to do this to survive, so we have survival as well. The way I can interpret this, there are not so much like sentiments, if you think that, yeah, positive change we have here as well. No one thinks that this is negative, so I also have positive direction. Sometimes when we do this, we can see that there are some people maybe feel a bit threatened, which is also, of course, normal when it comes to change and transformation. So, yeah. What this tells us is that we have a lot of different views on what digital transformation is, and it's a lot of different perspectives depending on whether we maybe come from the human resources department. Then we maybe tend to look at culture or how we organize and new competencies and stuff like that. If we're from the IT, we most likely think more about technology. And if we are from the product team, we have one set of thinking. And if we were to come from another department, such as the marketing department, maybe we think about from push to pull or social media or marketing automation or things like that. So there are different perspectives here. And it's very important to understand that not everyone is thinking about the same thing when we talk about digital transformation. But we are also now in a very special time, as we know, in the pandemic. So let us go to the next question, and you, Tony, take over.
Okay, great. So there's undoubtedly a huge amount of change has happened in the last couple of months. And what we'd like you to do is, again, use your phone, just press on to next question, and put in some thoughts in terms of how your firm has changed its approach to digital over the course of the COVID pandemic. Okay, so some interesting stuff coming through there. Obviously, new ways of working, and Zoom, yeah, if it's not Zoom, it's Teams or whatever, but everyone has basically switched to meetings like this. Yeah, I suppose a case of moving to reality, accelerated, all digital now, more positive. Things that we thought weren't applicable, we now know are. And the exec board now realized the importance of the investment in digital. So yeah, some really interesting stuff coming through there. And look, there's no doubt that the global health and economic crisis has caused traditional businesses to be disrupted, to change the way they work, to change the way they do things. But it's equally caused a lot of firms to have substantial losses, and in some cases to actually close their doors. So when we think about this, there's really two planning horizons. And what we're seeing at the moment is obviously there's a short-term horizon where firms are responding to what is happening in the environment. So they're having to shift, people to working from home. They're having to shift to working online. They're remotely dealing with customers, and they're putting in a whole range of short-term solutions to deal with the change that has been foisted on them, but equally to survive, because many businesses were not set up for survival pre-COVID. So firms that were reliant 100% on customers coming through the door, that's all changed. So what we've seen is a lot of action and arguably a lot of reaction. So it's not that these were planned changes, these were more things that firms did in response to this scenario they found themselves in. And what we would say, look, it's incumbent on leaders to focus not just on the short term, but also to focus on the long term as well, because this is an opportunity, as it came up on the Menti there, in terms of, this change is happening and it is real. And what we need to figure out is, okay, well, what are the things that have happened that were good, and how can we embrace those? How can we actually systemize them into our business? What are the things that had some impact, but actually gave us great ideas in terms of things we could do better going forward? And where are the gaps, and what are the things that we would say to ourselves in terms of when we look at this business over the more medium long-term horizon, the things we would want to change to make sure that our business can be competitive. Now, the risk is that, yes, firms should do this, and every board should be asking, probably, well, why didn't we do some of this pre the crisis? Because it's not that the technology wasn't available, and it wasn't that we hadn't got warnings around pandemics. So the real question is, are we seeing a shift? And I would argue that what we have seen is a knee-jerk reaction in many cases, because you can't change culture and you can't change mindset in the space of 3 months. You can certainly do things, but I think it's a question, how do you embrace that and support and reinforce it, so some of these things start to work in the organization as a way of doing business? And here's a quote from Charlene Lee, which caught our attention. Really interesting. Are firms able to think beyond the next 30 days, but are they really looking for the new reality, or are they looking to return to what was? And my concern would be that a lot of firms are in a rubber band syndrome, where they're sort of saying, yeah, we've done these things. Some of them are interesting, some of them are good, but actually we want to get back to the way things were. And we see that in conversations that we're having with firms on a daily basis. Moving on there, please, Joakim. So there's been plenty of winners. Equally, there has been plenty of losers. And some sectors have been particularly hard hit, be it tourism, hospitality, gyms, whatnot. But some businesses have actually done particularly well. And those businesses typically understand their customers, they understand their markets, they understand what the customer is trying to do. And what they do is they focus on the experience that they are trying to create for the customer. And within that, they look at, well, how does technology support, enable, and underpin that? But they don't start with the technology. They design from the customer in. So that at all times they're focused on, well, what is our customer trying to do and how could we do that better for them? And there's some great examples. I mean, Amazon, clearly, we knew Amazon was a great company beforehand, and they've just accelerated throughout the crisis. But equally, Walmart, totally different type of business. Walmart has shown that actually pound for pound it can go head to head with Amazon. We've seen the likes of Uber Eats come in, and okay, the Uber might not be in its prime at the moment, but Uber Eats is flying. Zoom, we mentioned already, Zoom and Slack, Walmart, Netflix, if you're working from home. And one of the ones I find interesting is Peloton. Bring your gym home in virtual reality, a bike with the computer already built into it, so you're part of a live class. So what we're seeing is a lot of interesting things happening, and we're seeing that firms that had a digital mindset and that were focused on customers actually are the ones that are really winning through this crisis.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you also for then emphasizing on what the firms that has succeeded well in the pandemic has in common. Let us zoom out a bit and also look at what do companies and businesses have in common that succeed in digital transformation as a whole. And I will start this off by using a metaphor that we often use that has to do with surfing and wave surfing. And I'm pretty sure that some of you that is out there talking or seeing us and listening to us right now are avid surfers and enjoy the sport or the lifestyle of surfing. As you probably also know, then a surfer pretty much has 3 different tasks that it has to master. First of all, a surfer needs to take position. It has to throw itself into the water, paddle out there, pass through the waves that are approaching, and find a space a lot in the water where it increases the likelihood to actually be able to take these waves that are approaching. The second, of course, is to then reach out, watch the horizon, and see what of these waves that are now approaching towards me should I go for, or should I let by, or whatever. So that's the next question, to choose the right waves. And as the wave approaches, you of course have to prepare, but then you have to make sure that you make the most of the waves that are approaching and that you are trying to ride. And these 3 tasks are the same 3 tasks that pretty much every company, every business has when it is working in digital transformation as well. The first thing is this one. No one has ever succeeded in learning how to surf just by watching a webinar or reading a book, even though both watching a webinar and reading a book is of course something we recommend. You can't even learn surfing by watching YouTube videos or TED Talks or whatever. You need to actually throw yourself into water and get going. And it's the same with digital transformation. You need to start doing things, not only reading or thinking. The second part you need to do is to have a good business intelligence, so you understand the business surroundings and what is out there, and what of these waves of change that you see that approaches you all the time will you then take, and which of these waves should you then monitor and which could you just let by. And thirdly, of course, even though you do understand what waves to surf on, it's not always that you can make the most of the waves. Very often we see that you can't make anything out of the waves because you have some type of hurdles when trying to catch these waves. And I'm just gonna reach out to you who's listening right now. Could you write in the chat what kind of hurdles might there be that make companies not be able to take the waves that they see they need to pick? So write different type of hurdles that you see in an organization that makes it harder to surf these great waves. Lack of transparency could definitely be one. We have investments. We don't have sufficient resources to actually do this. Working in silos between different departments, so we don't have a holistic view of everything, and we maybe don't have the client in focus. Fear of the unknown, of course. We know what we have today, but we don't know what this is going to lead to. We have integration of digital capabilities with existing infrastructure. Yeah. Lack of executive buy-in, that's also very common. It might be that they say that this is very important, but they have really not bought into it. And you can see that in a person's eyes if they say that this is something we're gonna go for, or if it's just, yeah, this is important. Trying to ride too many waves at the same time, that could be a problem as well. I agree with that. Lack of alignment. We don't have a common view on the challenge out there. So we need to try to align maybe both executive management team, but also the whole organization to go towards the same goal. We don't have the right skill sets. We might be resilient to change. We don't have maybe enough resilience to change. We have legacy system, old IT systems, maybe that even though we want to do stuff, we can't because it's not possible in the IT systems we're having. All right, it's a lot of great things here in the chat. And what you also could do, I could just show you. You see the 3 dots in the chat? If you press there, the 3 dots, you can then save the chat if you think that, wow, here are some great ideas that I want to bring with me from this. All right, next thing. What ways of change could there be out there to be able to ride them? Here are some of the ways of change. It could be ecosystems. Everyone would like to build an ecosystem these days, right? It could be about wearable things you have on your body. It could be drones, maybe if you're into selling things in remote areas. Drones could be very good. Bring your own device. It could be, of course, artificial intelligence. Everyone is talking about AI also these days. Robotics, RPA, things like that. So here are some of the waves. And most people, when they see these type of waves, feel a bit stressed maybe. It's not like they have an action plan for each and every one of these waves, but we suggest that you try to understand these waves and also try to understand which of these waves should we act on, which of these ways should we monitor, and which of these could we just let by because they are not of importance for us, our industry, or for companies as a whole. We are also companies, we see companies that succeed in transformation. They are very good in a thing of trying to adapt to this more complex world. And they're very good in balancing what is today with what is needed tomorrow. This is yesterday's view on how you usually or very often were running companies. Very often you had an entrepreneur in the beginning that was running the company all the way to the proof of concept. The proof of concept is this line right here. And what usually happened when you reached the proof of concept was that the entrepreneur was replaced by a real boss, so to speak. And all of a sudden, the focus went from innovation entrepreneurship to operational excellence and doing things every day a little bit better to try to increase profit margins and work with processes and stuff like that. And that worked fairly well, or really well in some cases, when you maybe had 20, 25, 30 years to reap the benefits of the wave you were riding. But what happens when we get new waves all the time that converge, that are immensely big? Then you need to combine the two. You need to be able to both have operational excellence, to be a little bit better every day in what you're doing today, but also combine that with an innovation mindset and entrepreneurial culture. And what is hard about this is that these are two completely different cultures, and usually also two different type of leaderships. Operational excellence usually works fairly well to be just a manager or boss, but entrepreneurship and innovation is more about leadership and talking to the heart of people to understand the big picture and seeing the vision towards we strive all the time. So from this, how do you then decide what you need to do and when you need to do it? And this brings us into the concept of digital maturity. What is then digital maturity? It is how far a company has come, or an organization in digitalization and digital transformation as compared to its environment. And what we believe and think is that everything else equal, if you increase your digital maturity, you will become more competitive as a company. And hopefully you agree on that as well. A few years ago, Marie Andervin and I was then doing the research for the book Leading Digital Transformation. And it took us some 3.5 years, some 5,000 hours, and we had 40 co-creators, among them John Cotter from Harvard, and also Brian Solis, Altimeter. I think he's now changed to Salesforce, actually. And we built on existing research and literature. We did a lot of case studies, and we came up with this book. And in this book, the central part of this book has a methodology which we call then the Digital Maturity Matrix. Let's look at that. What this tells us is that digital maturity and digital transformation, it's a journey. It's a big journey that exists of a lot of small journeys. And every business, every organization go through pretty much 3 phases. The first phase we call the mobilization phase. It's about mobilizing energy within the company and get sense of urgency and a sense of opportunity. Get things going, get people aboard. And then you enter the coordination phase, and then you go into the acceleration phase. In the first phase, the mobilization phase, you have existing activities. It's things that you already are doing. Maybe you're really successful as well. It might be the analog part of your business or your bricks and mortar part. To that, you would like to then add more of digital activities. In the beginning, what usually happens is that the digital activities and existing activities are held pretty separately from one another. And we talk about digital as it's something else, something separate from what we're already doing. You might do this with a separate department, or you might do it with some separate people, or it could be a part of everyone's daily work. It's very common not so in the last example. What happens then is that you start doing things within your digital activities and you start getting some kind of traction here. And as you get traction, you get more resources from the management team, and you get more people, and this becomes more and more important of your business, and you have proof of concept. What happens then is that you then enter the coordination phase. And this is where you have to coordinate between the old, the existing activities, and the new. You need to combine these 2 worlds. And you start to get some friction between the 2, which is good, because friction means that you are moving. But it might also become then open conflicts. And as a leader here, you need to really be able to balance between the new and the old and get people to collaborate so we can get the best from the existing activities and combine that with the best from the new. And very often also in the coordination phase, you have a digital strategy, for instance. But when entering the acceleration phase, the last phase, then all of a sudden, maybe it takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years before you end up there. But then in this phase, what you have is that you have digitalization as a natural part of your business. You have one vision, you have one mission, you have one strategy, everyone is working towards the same goal. And that's quite new as compared from coordination phase, where you maybe have a overall strategy, but you also have a digital strategy, for instance. But in the acceleration phase, everyone is working towards the same goal. And you can say that you have made a lot of the digital transformation, even though, of course, there are new waves arising all the time, as we can see here. And how do we then do this? What we are doing in practical, and we do that as a Dig Journey, but also at our partner Beta Digital, is that we measure digital maturity. We do this by measuring overall digital maturity index, DMI, from 0 to 100%. And we also measure the standard deviation. I will get back to that later. We also measure this in 9 different areas. We call these areas digital motors. One is values, vision, and mission. Another can be strategy work, how we work with strategy. Then the organization, that is culture and competences and stuff like that. And we continue to processes, infrastructure, which is also IT, data and analysis down to your value proposition, what you are offering your target groups, how you make money out of that, the revenue model, the touch point where you reach your target groups, but also how you build relationships with them. And what we see is that these different motors should have a certain digital maturity as compared to one another for this transformation to be as efficient and smooth and quick as possible. And when gathering this data, we do look at companies, but we also ask the companies themselves, for instance, an executive management team. So they do this survey. They might have 10 different people, maybe, or 5 or whatever, who answer this survey. And what we get then from this test is that we can see where do the executive management team or the rest of the organization, where do we align and where do we deviate in terms of how we see our status as of today. And where we don't align, it's really important that we work with that so we can get an alignment so that everyone is agreeing on where we are today, so that everyone also is agreeing where we should be going. So that's how we do this. So let's try now, and this is not easy, but let's try to estimate your company's digital maturity just overall. And here you can take over the screen again, Tony.
Yep.
Next one. How digitally mature is your organization? And how can you think here? 10 to 20% is you haven't even started. 81% is, yeah, you're like Google or Facebook or whatever. 61 to 80, you're really good, but maybe you're not the pioneer, but you are really getting traction and return on investment. So take a few seconds and fill this out and see where your digital maturity is as of today. So we have 21 to 40%, which is then companies that have started, get going a bit. And then we have these more in the coordination phase. Maybe it is that you work a lot to try to combine the new with existing. And we also have 2 that are really pioneers in what they are doing. Some kind of, maybe it's, we have some from Yahoo or Google here, or it might be startups that are really digitally avid. And we also have one that hasn't really started yet. So it's a spread between different ways of doing it. We could, yeah. So thank you very much for this. It looks almost a bit like a standard deviation curve. So from this, let us continue, and I will let you, Tony, share the screen, or I'll take this over just in a second. Let's see here. There we go. So Tony, talk about the 6-step process. What is that?
Thanks, Joakim. So look, that was a very quick dip into a digital maturity assessment for a firm. So as Joakim says, we measure the digital maturity of the firm, we measure across the motors, and we measure the questions within each motor. So we get a very comprehensive view of an organization in terms of where it's at. So that's step 1. And what we find is that that's a real eye-opener for firms, because they've never really looked at their business this way. They've talked about digital transformation, probably not in a consensus view in terms of what they mean by digital transformation. They're doing a lot of things, and quite often they're missing the context. And what the Digital Maturity Index does, it actually puts it really stark in terms of where they're strong, where there are gaps, and interesting, what it brings to the fore is the points of difference. Because quite often in organizations, these are unspoken. And you need to make sure that these are unearthed early in the process, because if everyone is talking about the same thing with the same understanding, you have a real opportunity to move the organization forward. But that's just your own organization. You also need to know, relatively speaking, where are you vis-a-vis the marketplace? So if your customers are more digitally mature than you, that could be a problem. If your competitors are more digitally mature than you, and that's what your customers want, that is a real problem. And if someone like an Amazon or or one of these firms was to come into your market, what would they do, and would you be able to compete? So you need to understand your own assessment, and you need to have a proxy in terms of the marketplace. Then what we say is, look, that's your business today, but your business isn't static. So if you look out the horizon, and Joakim showed you a slide there with, I don't know, 40, 50 waves of change. Well, the real challenge for executive teams is to figure out, well, which ones will fundamentally change their business 3-5 years down the road? Because you can't do everything. You can't do 100 things. You need to determine which are the ones that will make a profound difference in our business, and how are we going to make sure that we understand what they are and what that means in terms of digital competence and digital capability. And that starts to set out our digital destination. And in the knowledge of your business today and your business into the future, you can then determine your strategy, and from there you can build a transformation plan that is holistic and all-inclusive. So you need to do that. And the way we describe it is in 3 parts: understand, envision, and transform. But it is holistic, and it is taking every aspect of the firm, starting with your own business, with a real understanding around how digitally mature you are today. So we could get into a lot more detail on this, but we're going to move shortly into the questions and answers. There are a few things that I want to say, though, is that, look, digital transformation, it's not about starting with technology. It's very much about mindset and culture. So if you understand your why, if you understand how you need to transform, well, the what questions around technology start to become easy to answer. As we said, you need to understand digital maturity, but equally important, you need to understand those points of difference, because if you don't understand them, you're making assumptions that we're all on the one page. And executives don't have to kill an organization's strategy by doing things. They can kill it by doing nothing. And the organization equally is very quick at reading whether executives are bought in or not. So if you can get to a stage where actually we all understand and embrace the differences, and we're all talking about the same thing, and we understand our digital maturity, and we understand how we're going to improve it, the organization sees that. But equally, as I said, you need to understand it 3 to 5 years out. You need a plan that's holistic. And the beauty about measuring your digital maturity is you can do it on a repeat basis. And in the first instance, I would say, your score will probably go down. And that's okay, because what we're looking for is that the standard deviation goes down, which means that people are now talking about the same things, or at least to a greater extent. So it needs to have a plan that you can benchmark, that you can build confidence within the team, and also achieve some results. And it needs to be inclusive and led from the top, because if the top team aren't bought into this, and if the board and the executive team are not looking to change how you run the organization, how you report on it, how you measure, or how you reward on a day-to-day basis, well, the risk is it's just another initiative that's running in the organization. So I think at that, Joakim, we're going to move to some Q&A.
Yeah, so please just ask questions in the chat.
While we're waiting, Joakim, I mean, I had an interesting experience with one company I was with there a little while back, and one of the executives said, "Well, you're making it sound like the organization is broken," and I said, "No, we're not." And he said, "But that's what you're showing us." And I said, "No, but this is your data. This is what your leadership team, so it was the executive and the next level down, so the SMT, or if you want to call it that, but it was the wider leadership team. And what really intrigued them was that there was just a spread of scores. And there was people in the organization who thought they had one strategy that had a digital perspective. There was people in the organization who thought they had a digital strategy and they had a separate strategy. There was people that thought they had a strategy but no digital strategy. There's people that thought had a digital strategy but no strategy, and there's people who thought they had neither, and that was in the leadership team. And that's just off one question. So what I'd say is it really does provoke discussion, because if you can get those type of things out in the open, you then you can then take steps to close them out.
So okay, I'll read it then. What do you think are the 3 magic questions to make the company leadership really think hard about the digital strategy for the company? Do you have any magic questions, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a big piece of work done on digital transformation, and by Dell it was, and basically what they came up with was that actually, most executives do not know what their business will look like in 3 years' time. Equally, they were able to show that most executives are concerned that their business might be obsolete in 3 years' time. So I think the key questions for me are, one, does the firm, is it clear on its purpose? Does it understand, why it exists? And if it understands that, how is it actually going to deliver against that? Because that starts to drive your digital transformation agenda. Another is, well, how close are you really to understanding your customers and the experience that you will need to be able to deliver against if you want to be successful in the future? And I think the other one is, how aligned and bought into a shared vision and understanding are your people? Because if your people are not bought into this, well, you can't impose digital transformation on the organization. Your people need to be bought into it. They need to understand, what does it do for the firm? What does it do for the customers? What does it do for them? What does it do in terms of, the firm being there in 3 or 5 years' time, or whatever their ambition is? So you need to be able to answer questions like that.
Okay, guys, I just noticed we've a question in there in the Q&A from Neville. Does the term like digital lead CEOs to pass the buck to IT, and should we be using some other terms?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, Neville. I think when people hear the word digital, they immediately think it's a technology issue, where actually the emphasis needs to be on transformation. It just so happens we're transforming using some new digital tools and technologies. So I think there's a real concern. I think that boards and executives, once they think it's a technology issue, run. And I think what we need to do, it's incumbent on us collectively to do, is to have boards and executives and CEOs understand, actually, this is about our business model. This is about our customers, and this is how we run our organization today and out into the future. But I agree 100% with you, Neville. Once that word digital appears, people start thinking it's a technology issue. And, if they're like me, maybe they're not 100% comfortable with technology, particularly if it's technical.
Very good. We've another question there from Ivy, thanking both you and Joakim, Tony, for the useful sharing. What she wants to know is, how do you overcome resistance to change, and how to drive the digital transformation in a way that is sustainable and could get stakeholders, especially senior management, buy-in in a VUCA environment?
I could get a go at that question. How do you overcome resistance to change? It's about a few different parts of this question. I think one of the most important here is to really be able to understand why. Why do we exist as a company? What is our purpose, as Tony was talking about? If we understand what our purpose is, and also why we should make this change and this transformation, if we have a clear opportunity in why we should be moving, that's one of the best ways to get sense of urgency and also sense of opportunity. And we would like this to be as positive as possible. We would like it to be more pull than push if possible. If you get people to go along and go aboard, and they are positive to this change, they will make more effort into trying to do this, instead of they feel threatened to do it. So that's probably one of the parts. And of course, how do you motivate people? You do that by getting them involved, so they are a part of the whole change. You do that by giving them autonomy, so they can decide themselves what to do. And you also do that by giving them the competence they need to be able to understand what they're going to do. So learning is key here. If you can work with a lifelong learning journey, both for individuals and companies, the change and the resistance to change will disappear, because the resistance has usually to do with fear, and fear has to do that it's something that we don't understand. So if we increase our knowledge and we understand it, the fear decreases.
Good.
So the other part of that was how to drive the digital transformation in a way that is sustainable. And I guess it's sustainable in the way that it's long-term, or is it sustainable in a sustainable world? I'm not sure. I think it's long-term here, and could get stakeholders, especially senior management, buy-in a VUCA environment. I think the same thing here. I mean, if you really buy into why you have to change, and it's important to change, and everyone is really believing it at core or at their hearts, I think you will have a sustainable change. So you need to work all the time with revisiting why you do what you do and where you're heading. Your vision and your mission should be revisited all the time. So that was my view on that.
Yeah, we have a really good question in here from Noel Carroll. Maybe I'll put it to Tony first, just to vary the responses. You mentioned that the transformation strategy is approximately 3 to 5 years or more. How do you benchmark or gauge performance during the early stages, for example, 1 to 2 years, to ensure that you're on track and not getting distracted by, in inverted commas, the digital, while taking your eye off the transformation process? Any tips? Really good question, I think, from Noel, Tony.
Yeah, no, it's a super question, though. So look, what I'd say to you is firstly, we need to know where we're going. So if we have gone through the 6-step process and we have a real clear view of where we're taking this organization and why we have a benchmark in terms of how mature we are today, which we can track over a period of time. So we could track that every 6, 9, 12 months, whatever is appropriate for the organization. But I equally think what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're building in wins. So once we're factoring in wins that are on plan. So if we know we need to get from Cork to Dublin, and we know there are certain places along the way that we need to get to, we need to make sure that we're factoring them in to make sure that we're achieving them, and that we can demonstrate to the organization and to other stakeholders that we are making progress. But for me, I think the key is, and I can't emphasize this enough, if the standard deviation within your digital maturity index is narrowing, in fact, if it got to 0, it would be nirvana. But if it's narrowing over time, it means that your organization is actually thinking about the same thing and trying to get to the same place in unison. The problem in most organizations is that, politics or power or whatever takes over, and what we have is, projects and initiatives that are not necessarily on message or not necessarily in the right sequence. So I think you need to make sure that there is a real open dialogue where all perspectives are understood, and there's a real measurement in terms of, well, just where are we at and what things are important in this journey. Now, if there's agreement on those things, people are very innovative. They will find the right things to do, but it's around making sure that, if you're pointing true north, that everything you do is pointing true north. And that includes, what you talk to your people about, what you report to the board on, how you measure things, how you reward things, and how you engage with people. Because if you keep changing the message and keep changing direction, well, the organization starts to see through it as just another bunch of initiatives from head office.
That's a great answer, Tony. I think that that alignment is critical. There's one here from Marie, maybe Joakim, if you could have a shot at this one, about her experience that digitalization fundamentally changes the role of the company in the market and how they often serve that market, and that they often need to change position. Marie was wondering, do you have an example of that?
It's nice to answer my colleague here, my co-writer as well. She could probably answer this as good as I can, but anyway, I'll do that. So what happens usually is that in a market, when digital start and you get like different external drivers in the market, the whole market changes in the sense that you cannot play the same game again. And when you cannot play the same game as you used to, you then need to reimagine yourself in a way. I mean, a good example here is, of course, Netflix, that once upon a time wasn't a streaming company. Netflix used to be about having like a subscription of 3 DVDs at home. So you subscribe for a fixed fee monthly, and then you watch the movie, and then you sent that movie back, and then you got a new movie back at home that you could watch, for instance. But what that made for Netflix was that they collected a lot of data, so they could see that the person that liked this movie also liked that movie and this and that movie. And then Reed Hastings, one of the main owners and also the entrepreneur and the founder of the company, figure out that maybe it's not going to be a physical market in the future as well. So we need to start moving towards the right direction. So he then started to work out how they're going to become a streaming company instead, still with movies as the core of what they do, but they needed to redo themselves from inside out. And of course, it's a huge difference in being more like a logistics company, to be honest, to be able to send these DVDs back and forth to see that that works, but of course also then bringing that into the new world with completely different new competencies that you have to do. So I think that's a good example of where bricks and mortar, more type of analog business has transformed into a digital business. Now you're muted, Paul.
There you go. Yeah, that's as I was typing answers and I don't want to be interrupting you. I think it's a great example, Joakim. I mean, Neville also in the chat there just put in Marks and Spencer's as well, which I think is one really, really good example as well of a company that's had to shift position. Just moving on, I'll open this out to you guys. Gordon has asked, how do you overcome change fatigue? Which I think is a really, really good question for people who are, either in the middle of or, well down the road on digital transformation or any transformation.
Should we take that as the last question, maybe? So
yes, maybe yes, yeah.
Tony, do you feel to take a go at it, or?
No, we could take that as the last question. There's one before that there from Neville on all businesses want more engagement, and this is a great opportunity, but how and what's the first step? And I think for me the first step is actually, opening up the mind to possibilities. What's happening out there? Why is it happening? What does that mean for our business? How well are we positioned against it? And it kind of leads towards the next question. But I think, Neville, this is around, bringing your people into the discussion. And one of the things that I'm a strong believer in that is, most organizations out there were, they were born analog, and in reality are run by executives who were equally born analog. We have a whole bunch of people working in our organizations who are digital natives, who see the world totally different and see it the way, many of our current and future customers are going to see it. So we need to make sure that we're bringing these people into the tent and taking all that knowledge that they have and working with them to make sure that we're shaping the organization for the future.
I could take the last one with how do you overcome change fatigue. I think, first of all, this also has to do with if you have real buy-in in the organization, why we need to change. The change fatigue itself will not be a big problem, I think. Also, what you need to do, of course, is to see that the change you have been doing is having some kind of impact and effect. So you have quick wins and you can see that we did X, Y, Z, and that led to this. But I also think what people usually are tired of, because we need to understand that constant change is the new normal. We cannot work as we used to do when we have like, okay, now we're going to work like this for 3 years, and then we unfreeze and we change, and then we freeze again, and we're going to work like this for 3 years. It ain't going to work. We need to have an agile process where we change all the time. But I think one thing that people are tired of is new executives changing the way we're going to change. So they implement new ways of changing, and they do organizational change just for the sake of it, or they have new methods of changing. I don't think people have a problem with changing. Usually the problem is that they don't get the slack to actually be able to change. So if you give them the reason why we should change, you give them the autonomy to be able to decide also how you should change. If you are stable in your vision, stable in your process and how you work with it, I think the change fatigue will go down as well.
I'd add to that, Joakim, just make sure you have a good, solid communication with your staff and with your people, and make communications a plan that lives through the change and not something that you do as a one-off event to announce the change. I think that's vitally important as well. I think we'll take that's all the questions covered, I think. I think you want to hand over to, do we want Lars to close us out?
Yeah, please, Lars.
Okay, hi, it's Lars here at Journey. I just want to take the opportunity, it's just a couple of minutes left here, just to give you some information about the certification course that we are having in the, that we call the Leading Digital Transformation. So we've been holding about 15 certification courses, and we have a bit more than 200 leaders that are certificated now in digital transformation. And we have done one English class before, and we will do that now again together with Beta Digital. And so what you see here is like the sort of regime here. It consists of 6 half-day virtual classes. So it's in the morning, it's from 8:30 to 12:30. For 6 days. It starts off at 22nd of September and ends at 6th of October. And the meaning is that it will bring you forward in a pretty condensed time, but still you can work with what you normally do. And the idea is also in this course that you can bring in a case with you. So either you're working with your company as a case, or you're working, if you're a consultant, you're working maybe with a case or a company that you are working with as a consultant. So you bring that case into, and we work with the 6 steps that Tony went through very briefly, but we really deep dive into these steps, and you will also be able to listen to different cases about other companies that have done this. And well, we bring you from leading digital transformation to what it means to the 6 steps. And it's very useful. And I think it's, if you want more information, please look into the chat. I think it's distributed there with a link to the program. And if you want more information, don't hesitate to call or contact Joakim or Tony for more information. Okay, that's a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so please, thank you very much, Lars. Please join us on this. I love doing this. I love doing these classes as well. It's usually I learn as much as the attendance as well. And it's a lot of sharing because we have people from all over the place. Some come as from the IT department, some come from consulting firms, and some come from our CEOs and different parts. So we have a really great like wide perspective on digital transformation, as you also seen in the beginning with the cloud that we built up together. So it's a lot of fun to do this, and we really get to dig a bit deeper into digital transformation and understand what that means to you and your company. So please join us there. Just lastly, me, Paul, and Lars and Tony would like to thank you very much for attending today. It's been a pleasure having you here, and hope that you have gotten any useful tips that you could use in the future. And please contact us if you would like to discuss digital transformation further. Thank you very much from Stockholm.
And thank you very much from Dublin.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.